We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 400...
Hi everyone, welcome to co-production between WION and Voice of America. I'm Susan Tehrani coming to you live from New York City. Let's start with our top story. Well, for the first time, the leaders of Japan, South Korea, and the United States are holding a trilateral summit. The leaders will meet at Camp David, the traditional presidential retreat. They're expected to discuss increasing security ties and a plan by Japan to start releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant as early as the end of August. Henry Ridgewell reports from Tokyo.
More than 1,000 giant tanks surround the wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, holding more than 1.3 million metric tons of wastewater used to cool the reactors. Most radioactive contaminants have been removed, but the water still contains the radioactive element tritium, explains American scientist Paul Dickman, an advisor to the Japanese government.
It is natural. It's in everything we eat, drink, and breathe, actually. Anything that has water in it has tritium in it. So all nuclear reactors produce, as a byproduct, small amounts of tritium. And the way that you deal with this, and we have constantly, is to discharge this either through evaporation into the air or discharge it into a water body, particularly if you're by the sea.
Japan plans to release the wastewater over several years, diluting the tritium concentration until the water quality exceeds drinking water standards. The plan was approved by the International Atomic Energy Agency last month, but it has provoked anger from some environmental groups. Fishing communities, like those at Tokyo's Tsukiji fish market, also fear their livelihoods will be hit.
The Japanese brand will decline. People will ask, is it being properly checked?
I'm worried about how other countries see it. I think there are harmful rumors in Japan.
The majority of scientists say the plan is safe, but some of Japan's neighbours, especially China, have strongly criticised the move, imposing restrictions on Japanese seafood imports.
Our opposition to Japan's ocean discharge plan and the relevant measures we are taking are well grounded.
Nuclear power stations across the world, including many in China, constantly dispose of tritium into the sea. Beijing does not publish figures of how much it releases into the oceans.
So there is a point of hypocrisy here. They're accusing Japanese of doing what they do. The regulatory authorities, both in Korea and China, who I think are pretty good, were quiet. They were silent on this, and yet they are authorizing their own companies and their own reactors to discharge into the sea every day.
Meanwhile, Japan is conducting a public communications campaign through animated films and advertising, even live streaming a video of fish living in a tank of treated wastewater. Here in Tokyo's giant Tsukiji fish market, the stallholders are confident over the safety of their seafood. But this isn't just about science. Japan is in a political and public relations battle with some of its biggest Asian buyers. Henry Richwell for VOA News, Tokyo.
Joining us now with additional analysis is VOA's Jessica Stone. She's live at the White House. Hi, Jessica. Great to see you. Can you tell us how this trilateral alliance of South Korea, Japan, and the United States evolved? And ultimately, what's on the agenda for this summit?
Well, as you mentioned, this is the first time that President Biden is welcoming any foreign leaders to Camp David. And of course, it's a location that has particular significance with respect to foreign affairs. You'll recall the Middle East peace deal announced there by Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. This is also the first time that these three leaders in particular are holding a standalone summit anywhere. They've typically been meeting on the sidelines of bigger summits thus far. So that also is significant. And national security and as well as economic prosperity are both on the agenda. You think of North Korea being number one. They, of course, in recent days have set off additional ICBMs, missile tests. And Beijing's backing of North Korea is also at issue, as well as its increasingly aggressive and assertive moves in the South China Sea, as well as in the Taiwan Straits. The White House really is looking here for a durable framework for Indo-Pacific strategy in which it could incorporate Japan, South, like the Pacific Islands, like ASEAN, like AUKUS, like the Quad. And so this is another effort to continue countering China in the Taiwan Strait and the region. And also on the subject of economic cooperation, we're looking at possibly getting an agreement on supply chain resilience. The White House says they want this to outlast any future presidents. And you also asked the road to get here. This is a moment really that's unprecedented in South Korea-Japan relations. Japan, of course, ruled South Korea for 35 years in the early 1900s, culminating at the end of World War II with the Japanese surrender. And they have had a long road to hoe with respect to overcoming historical differences, but now they have common enemies in the form of Russia, North Korea, and China. Susan?
Great. Yeah, definitely a fragile relationship, and perhaps rapprochement may be the best way at this time. Jessica, stay with us. Thanks for that analysis as we move on to the Iowa State Fair. It wraps up on Sunday. It's a unique opportunity for Republican candidates to court voters who will be the first in the nation to choose their preference for the party's presidential nominee in next year's election. VOA's Kay Faribault has more from Iowa.
Over 1 million people visit the Iowa State Fair each year, But Cedar Rapids resident Rick Stewart isn't at this year's event to see the life-size cow made of butter. He's here to perform a civic duty.
It's a chance to see all the candidates for president, and I feel it's a personal obligation as an Iowan to go and do my homework because the rest of the country is relying on us to caucus intelligently next January.
Incumbent President Joe Biden is the likely nominee for Democrats in the 2024 presidential election, and polling shows former President Donald Trump leads the Republican side.
I'll be honest, I'm a Trump supporter, but I want to hear what the other people have to say.
Iowa voter Celia Criswell had a choice location in the front row at the Des Moines Register's political soapbox stage.
We've given them $100 billion.
Which gives candidates like Miami Mayor Francis Suarez
so what I'm going to do
and businessman Perry Johnson, both significantly trailing Trump in polling, a chance to make their campaign pitches.
I want to hear what other people have to say and see if they're good candidates. And maybe in 2028, some of these people would be good for the presidency, and maybe they're good for a vice president right now.
Trump has visited Iowa fewer times than others seeking the nomination, yet still enjoys strong support among Republican voters. While most candidates appeared at the soapbox or attended Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds' Fairside Chats, Trump declined, preferring to visit the fair for a few hours on Saturday to walk among cheering crowds. Terry Rumpf traveled from Indiana, specifically looking for an alternative to Trump.
The comparisons with Biden in terms of age is not a good thing. Plus, he's got so much baggage. I don't want all the, riots in the streets for 4 more years.
Stewart, meanwhile, has doubts about Trump being able to defeat Biden.
That's the goal. We want to win the general election. The best candidate that has a chance of doing that should be our nominee.
And is Trump that candidate?
I do not believe he is.
University of Iowa political science professor Tim Hagel says Stewart is not alone in his doubts.
Quite frankly, that seems to be the attitude of a number of Republicans, but not enough at this point to basically shift the momentum to some of the other candidates.
Hagel says doing well in Iowa's caucus is critical for those hoping to overtake Trump for the nomination, like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis really has to do well in Iowa, at least a very strong second for him to have any viability going forward. But for Trump, if he wins, and especially if he wins big in Iowa, then yeah, probably this time around it portend that he's going to get the nomination.
Stewart says he's not ready to settle on a candidate.
I believe that every Republican candidate that I've seen so far could beat Biden, and that would be good for me. But I'm not going to pick a favorite until I've seen them all.
Voters cast ballots in the Iowa caucus on January 15th. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Des Moines, Iowa.
VOA's Jessica Stode is still with us live from the White House. Jessica, next Wednesday, we'll see the first Republican television primary debate for the candidates. It comes the same week that the leading candidate, Donald Trump, and 18 other defendants must surrender at the Fulton County Jail to be booked on charges allegedly connected to a conspiracy to commit election fraud. What is the Trump team saying?
Well, Donald Trump, of course, has taken to social media almost immediately after the indictments were announced earlier this week, calling the Georgia Attorney General who is prosecuting him on state charges, quote, out of control and corrupt. And he also immediately offered to hold a press conference on Monday in which he would refute the charges of election fraud point by point, offer a big report. He has since canceled that press conference on Monday, he says, on the advice of his attorneys. But clearly in 3 years, we have not seen any definitive evidence of election fraud on the scale that would be necessary to overturn the election in Donald Trump's favor. In fact, 60 court rulings in multiple states over the past 3 years found that his claims had no merit or legal standing. As you said, he is supposed to surrender sometime next week by August 25th, which is next Friday. But the calendar is really stacking up against him with respect to his criminal and legal concerns, jutted against all of the campaign appearances and campaign activities that he needs to make. For example, He also has an order to appear on the third indictment. We're now at 4 indictments, so it's hard to keep track. Third indictment on Monday, August 28th. Somewhere in there, he's supposed to be campaigning. There are the Iowa caucuses. There are the New Hampshire primaries. There is, as you said, the debate next week, which at this point he is not expected to appear at, not only because of the calendar issues, but also he has not agreed to that pledge that he would support the eventual nominee, which is mandatory for any participants in that GOP primary next week. Susan?
Yeah, Jessica, after each of these indictments, we keep seeing a bump in opinion surveys for the former president and current Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump. But other polls suggest that Trump is truly vulnerable going into the general elections, where he would have to win the hearts and minds of some independents, at least, and Democrats as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there's a growing dichotomy, right, where we're seeing polling continue to support this presidential nominee. He's still leading this presidential candidate, not nominee. He's leading by double digits against people like Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, or Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey. But he does have vulnerabilities when it comes to the general election. We had this AP poll come out this week in which it said 53% of all the voters surveyed will not support Trump if he is the GOP nominee. 63% of Republicans, though, do want Trump to run again. That was taken before the 4th indictment, so we'll have to see how the polling changes, if at all, going into the next political cycle. The political polling website 538 looked at Trump's favorability ratings, and that's where he's suffering. We see this correlation between each indictment, Susan. Each indictment, his favorability rating overall is going down. Obviously, that could affect him in a general election, and that's what we're watching.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Jessica Stone joining us live from the White House. Have a great weekend, Jessica, and I'll talk to you again very soon. The United States intelligence has shared significant information regarding the Ukrainian counteroffensive. It says that Ukraine plans to regain lost territories, but those plans will fail to reach the Melitopol city. I'll tell you why that's important. According to a report by the Washington Post, this year Kyiv will not fulfill its key objective of pushing Russian forces further from their bases. The analysis is based on Russia's defense capabilities in the occupied territory. According to officials, Ukrainian troops will remain several miles outside of the city this year. Melitopol is critical to Ukraine's counteroffensive. Many experts consider it a gateway to Crimea. It is also the intersection of 2 important highways and railroads. These transport ways allow Russia to move military personnel and equipment from Russia to southern Ukraine. Meanwhile, NATO members Denmark and the Netherlands have been leading international efforts to train Ukrainian pilots, as well as support staff, maintain aircraft, and ultimately enable Ukraine to obtain F-16 aircraft for the use in its war with Russia. The clamor to provide Ukraine with United States-built F-16 jets is growing, however. The U.S. has approved sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine from Denmark and the Netherlands. Washington gave Denmark and the Netherlands official assurances that the U.S. will expedite approval of transfer requested for F-16s when the pilots are trained. Denmark and the Netherlands had recently asked for those assurances. Ukraine is struggling to counter Russia air and artillery superiority. With depleted strength and dated aircraft, the Ukrainian Air Force is no doubt struggling. Ukrainian fly Soviet-era jets like Sukhoi and MiGs. The country's current fleet of warplanes is older than modern Ukraine itself.
Киевляне практически
The Forbes annual 50 over 50 list, dedicated to spotlighting successful women over the age of 50 who are shattering age and gender norms across the categories of lifestyle, investor, impact, and innovation, features 9 Indian American achievers. Let's take a look at them. in U.S. mortgage rates has lowered housing affordability to its lowest level in almost 4 decades. Holding out for a break is a high-stake bet for those looking to get into the housing market here in the United States. And the lesson was harsh. The property boom's price rise finally slowed last year, but house prices have recovered the roughly $3 trillion they lost. One indicator of borrowing costs has reached a level not seen in almost 2 decades, and the Federal Reserve has hinted it may raise rates further, boosting the likelihood of 8% mortgage rates. Freddie Mac's 30-year fixed loan average rose to 7.09% on Thursday, the highest since 2002. The Mortgage Bankers Associated reported a 7.16 increase in the average 30-year fixed mortgage contact rate for the week ending in August 11th. Borrowers with poor credit and high debt to income ratios are receiving 8% quotations. Purchasers who are proceeding with mortgages expect to refinance when rates decrease in a year or two. They also believe purchasing now will offer cheaper prices than if rates relax and buyers rush in. House seekers are already competing for scarce inventory. Many homeowners have been hesitant to market their homes and accept reduced mortgage rates. According to Knight Frank, the supply restraint is driving up prices and rates as well, making this the least affordable housing market since 1984. Well, global actor Priyanka Chopra Jonas has decided to end her partnership with the restaurant Sona here in New York City. Chopra co-founded and opened the restaurant in 2021. The place will continue to remain open and serve customers. To make the official announcement, Priyanka's representative shared a statement. They wrote, and this is a quote, "Her fingerprints all over Sona, while she will no longer be involved as a creative partner moving forward. She remains in the Sona family, and we are excited for our respective and new chapters ahead," end of quote. Sona was first started while the COVID-19 restrictions were still in place, but it soon gathered a huge following on social media. Priyanka would often share photos from the restaurant and also hosted a few family gatherings at the restaurant as well. She also launched the Sona Home Collection in 2022, which included dinnerware that is, table linen, bar and decor, and gifts, among other items. The top 2 seeds, Alcaraz and Djokovic, remain on course for a meeting in the final, but the upsets in Cincinnati did not stop. 3rd seed Daniil Medvedev and 4th Stefanos Tsitsipas were sent packing from the round of 16. Olympic champion Alexander Zverev saw off Daniil Medvedev in 3 sets to reach the quarterfinal and snapped a 4-match losing streak against the Russian. The 2021 champion clinched the first set courtesy of a solitary break of serve. Medvedev fought back in the second set and forced a decider. Zverev fended off 2 break point at 4-4 in the third.